All right, so happy Monday, everybody. We are here today with Forest and Maine. Two, I thought it was just gonna be one, but we got two for today. We got both owners, Jared and Dan from Forest. How you guys doing?
Doing well. How are you? Doing good.
Doing awesome. It's hot. I can't stop sweating even though I'm indoors. How's the weather where you guys are at?
It's pretty humid. It's cooled off a little bit, but it's still pretty nasty.
Yeah, well, Jesus, it is terrible down here. But never fear, we've got some really great beer we're going to talk about today. It should help us cool down a little bit. It's super refreshing and citrusy. Before we go into kind of background and intro, I want to know to you guys. So I guess I'll give you a little background to why I'm asking this question first. But the more reading I did, the more research I did on you guys, and I was really interested in the kind of like dual story that you guys are telling at the brewery. And so it would be cool to hear what Forest and Maine is to you guys. I mean, it seems like it's more than just a brewery to me. I mean, there's beer being produced, but there's great label artwork. There is two different styles of beer being brewed. There is, different backgrounds coming to the table. Well, I guess, what does Forest and Maine mean to you guys?
Yeah, a lot of people kind of wonder, because we kind of do these two families of beer. We have like the Belgian farmhouse styles and then a lot of British session beers. And some people, think that they're just so different and don't really get how we can try to do that in one place. But we kind of approach them both in like really similar ways and almost feel like they serve like a similar function in terms of like their drinkability, the way they go with food, the way they kind of just like lend themselves to kind of like posting up at the bar and having a few of, like a lot of the recipes that we have for like a light bitter and a light saison actually like look pretty similar until we pitch the yeast and let it really ferment. So yeah, I think we have like a lot of like different things going on, but we also have this kind of like this motivation behind it all that seems, pretty continuous.
What drew the inspiration? Like, I guess why did you go with Belgian inspiration, and then why on the other side of the house? Why English? Is there anything that drew you to or any kind of, was it a beer that drew you to those two styles? Is it just what you like to drink? Are you brewing what you like to drink, what you enjoy, or is it something that does the Belgian farmhouse interpretation kind of play into the way your mind works, type of thing? Because it's a different kind of fermentation, right? It's a different sort of style.
Yeah, I think they were like both maybe like our kind of original passions, but I mean, I still love an English session beer, and Dan, still drinks plenty of saisons. But that was kind of like our initial inspiration and where we came from. Where I was brewing before, I was fortunate enough to brew saison pretty regularly, and I think like early inspirations, were just probably like early bottles of DuPont, and honestly, like the way like Phil Markowski would talk about saison, farmhouse ales, that book, and the way Gerard Oliver wrote about it in the Brewmaster's Table, like those are just like two of like the most romantic portrayals of saison out there, and I feel like, I know for me personally, that was just like a really inspiring look at those beers.
What about you, Dan?
I think that got me into English beers is Yard's ESA, which I don't know if you guys get Yards down there, but it's just like an awesome bitter. And then, so I was drawn to English style beers more so than Belgian beers, but I love them both. And I just love the history behind English beers, which kind of parallels the history behind Belgian beers as well. They're just like these locally very specialized beers that are brewed, to be consumed relatively young, and just the romanticism behind the history and just the fact that it's tied to like a small brewery usually, at least historically in England and Belgium, just really appealed to me.
I couldn't agree more with the romanticism behind some of these beers, right? It's especially with these two styles. I mean, there's so much history behind the way that the product's consumed, the way the product is brewed for a community, It's a representation of the area. You guys take the saisons one step level and use foraged yeast, even more representative of the community. We're going to go into that a little bit, but it's really cool to see. And you guys are actually doing traditional casks, right, for the English ales?
Yeah, we have 3 hand pumps right here, so it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. It's kind of daring too, though, right? I mean, how did people take to that at first?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely sell a lot more pale ale and saison than the bitters on hand pumps. But we love them. I mean, it's, and it's cool that there are some people that love them. It's not for everyone, served a little warmer, a little less carbonated, but the people that love it really love it, and it's worth it.
Sure. I mean, it's awesome too, because for anyone who's ever been overseas, to have a beer like this served in the traditional format, traditional style, is something special. We don't get very often, It's nice that you guys are not only brewing these styles, but then embracing the serving methods or the way that you're supposed to drink these beers. I think it makes a huge difference into the experience. I'm a big believer in total experience around a beer, glassware, even just like, being in a Victorian house like you guys are in. I think it adds to the whole experience behind the beer, and I'm sure it's appreciated by those who come in to Forest and Main and grab your beer.
We never considered doing a production brewery because that experience is so important to us. We want to serve the beer in the place that we kind of constructed and get that whole experience, like we said.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It's a beautiful thing to be able to see people and interact with people that are enjoying your product. I mean, it's got to be special. So I guess before we keep going into that stuff, because we're getting a little off my handy dandy outline here, I want to go into a little bit of you guys' background. I think it's cool to see where you guys came from to form Forest and Main. Jared, your background doesn't necessarily lead to this. I mean, I think Dan's may lead a little bit more towards what he's doing at Forest and Main. But correct me if I'm wrong. And by the way, let me backtrack even before I start going into this. But you said I got the opportunity to brew a few saisons before Forest and Main, but you neglected to mention that 3 years gold medal at GABF while you were there. That's called modesty to the fullest there. So you knew a thing or two about the saison. So it's definitely showing in your own beer. So I guess I want to go back way before that even, because I like to go into why or how people got to where they are. I think it's a cool perspective on the brand.
Sure.
So I think, if I'm correct, you went to Villanova, you studied psychology.
Yes.
And somehow ended up brewing.
Yeah, I was homebrewing at the time, but I did work at a mental health agency for a little bit. It was very rewarding, but also just very, very challenging personally.
Right.
I think in a lot of aspects in life, like when I get really interested in something, I just kind of have like a desire to really get to know it and kind of, create it in my own way. Or I'm starting to realize I can't do that with everything. I just had this wonderful goat cheese the other day, and my wife and I have a small farmer not far from the brewery, and I was like, I really think we should get some goats. And
I'm the same way.
I want to do this, we bake a lot of bread at home.
Yeah.
I need to back off sometimes. Just let other people do their things. But in terms of beer, I really got into Belgian style beers, and just kind of wanted to know it inside and out. And, for me, that meant brewing it as much as I could and experiencing it through that creation process of it. So when I had the opportunity to leave that mental health agency and work at Mackenzie Brewhouse, I jumped at that, and I was there for about 6 years with Ryan Michaels, and that was a great experience there.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'm the same exact way, and it's I've always had to find myself. I had to always kind of tell myself stop. There's only so much. What's the term? It's jack of all trades, master of none. After a while.
Yeah, I mean, we use like a lot of oak barrels for aging and stuff. So I naturally start thinking like, whoa, maybe we should start like coopering on site.
Oh, jeez.
We have some like oak trees at the farm. Can we incorporate those somehow? Like, you need to back off a little something.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's gonna be a little too much.
Yeah.
Oh man. So Dan, you at least you graduated from art school, right? I mean, from an art school. So you do the labels on the bottles, which this is one of them. If you guys haven't seen them, they're really beautiful labels. They're cool, and like if you see this, you know what brewery it's coming from. I mean, this style is kind of a theme throughout the labels. So it makes a little more sense how you got to where you're at, right?
In terms of making labels for beer, yeah, but not
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I went to art school, and you come out of art school, you're not just like hired by anyone. You don't just find a job the next day. So I was just kind of doing random jobs and whatnot, and I didn't even really drink beer or anything until I was in my mid-20s. I got my brother a homebrew kit for Christmas, and sort of like Jared, I just fall in love with whatever I'm doing and want to do it to the fullest. So I helped him brew the first batch of beer, and I didn't even drink beer at the time, but was like so enamored by the process. And then I tried the product, and it's really good. So within like a month, I was homebrewing every weekend. And then like a year later, I went to England, or years later, I went to England, studied brewing over there for a little bit. And I just was so into English beers, and it wasn't like a brewing course like you go in and learn everything about brewing. It was like a very traditional English brewing course. So you learn how to make English style beers.
Sure.
So yeah, that just, kind of like Jared just kind of went all in. I never looked back. And
brewing's one of those things for people who have like a personality that get like stuck on things. It's almost like the perfect drug for people that have our kind of thinking on things, because it's like it can always be better. There was always one step in the process that I could have done just a little better. There was always that like maybe 1 degree less I could have fermented that beer at that would have made it that much better. And so there's always that constant like striving to make the product perfect, and it's kind of lends to people with a personality that say, I want to jump right in. It's such a great way to kind of like go all in, right? It's dangerous at the same time, but
it's a very cool mix of like physical labor and mental, mental work and kind of like creativity. It just kind of satisfies a lot of different parts of me. Where one day I can be fixing something and you get the satisfaction of like fixing the pump, or it's it's very rewarding across the board. Not every day, but
and for some somewhat instant reward, right? I mean, you get to see at the end of your the hard the end work of your hard labor. A few weeks later, sometimes. Jared, you might be a little much longer for you, but. You get to see the instant reward, and I bet being around the brewery and the tap room and seeing the community come in and enjoy it is just sets it that much further above now that you're established as a force in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's a big piece that we talk about a lot too. And like a day like today's like a Monday, and we're closed here at the pub, but we're able here to take care of office stuff or take care of stuff in the brewery. And we spend about a little over a year renovating the house. And like for that time, it was kind of like, it was like our little clubhouse. We've kind of like said this before, that it was our place, especially as we were getting closer, where we had like, beers that were brewed and we had like a bar to sit at. We could come in here after like, painting or whatever and like have a beer, and it was our spot. But then at a certain point we had to like turn it over and like give it up and let people in, and now it's like it's their place, and we get to kind of create this setting and create these beers and pair it with like food on site, but really like it's the customers and like the people that are coming in, it's their local spot, it's their hangout now. Which is really cool to see, but also like really trippy to kind of like have something and then give it away and watch other people, have at it. You know?
Sure, it's that's a cool perspective on it that I don't really hear very often as I talk to people. Is it goes from like my baby to the neighborhood's baby, right? Especially with a brewery like you guys, where I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your intention is to always kind of stay this community brewery. Not really, you know, I don't want to be in California. I want to be in my community.
Yeah, I mean, we are expanding into a building right next to us, but that's just kind of like hoping to give us a little more like elbow room to kind of make things a little more streamlined and easier across the board. But yeah, really, we just kind of want to get to a volume that's like comfortable and can take care of like us and our staff and kind of create this spot, you know, in the community in the like greater Philadelphia area, and just kind of like, you know, have a home base here.
Sure. I love hearing that, and more as I talk to breweries, and I guess I'll get on a soapbox a little bit. I think to survive today in a brewing environment, you've got to either be like massive, I want to take over the country, or you got to cater to the community. I don't know that it was a business decision for you guys, as it seemed like it was, but you know, you've got to be kind of like this real presence locally, survive based on the tap room, not rely upon shelf space or bars or people buying your stuff. But I'm assuming with you guys, it doesn't seem like it was necessarily a business decision. It seemed more like this is the way we just want to operate. Is that?
I think it's reflective of our personalities and the kind of place we wanted to create for ourselves, almost more selfishly than anything.
Sure.
But I feel like another piece of it, you know, like when we were, you know, working on our plan and getting ready to open like 5 years ago, I feel like it was a different scene in a lot of ways. And also, you know, like we were 5 years younger and like approaching it from a different way. Can kind of like look back on things now and then, yeah, say like, yeah, we wanted to create this like localized center as opposed to like growing indefinitely.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm not sure if that was like our specific intention from the get-go, but it definitely resonates with us now, I think.
Right. And as we've been talking, you know, both of you guys have used the word romantic so far. And I think that, you know, really doing this is a romantic idea, right? And I always mention this in the interviews, but Jeff Stuffings from Jester King put it best, I think. The country's going back to communities having a butcher, a baker, and a brewer, right? Like, you know, and it's a very romantic idea to be able to go to your butcher, your baker, or your brewer, and servicing that need is a very romantic idea. And it seems like you guys, you know, and I want to go into the labels a little bit now, but even to the labels, and I from what I've read, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong again, but there's a story behind kind of like an overarching theme behind the labels and some of the characters in the labels.
There is, yeah. How much time do we have?
Well, we have as much time as you want to give us.
But
yeah, we haven't quite, you know, crystallized this this mythology we're creating behind all the labels. But it, you know, as we come up with these things, they definitely often connect with each other, with like the beers that are in the bottles. It's a really like fun process because oftentimes like we'll have the beer, it's like aging in barrels for a while. We pull it out when it's ready and we bottle it. It's going to spend another like resting time in the bottle. And it's usually in the bottle while Dan's like doing the label, and that kind of process is awesome to watch. Like we'll kind of like brainstorm an idea and then he just like rolls with it and creates these wonderful characters.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the character that the beer I'm drinking, there's a really cool kind of character on the label. Is there any explanation behind this? Why it matches with the beer? What it means in the whole scheme of things for Forest and Maine?
Well, in a lot of ways, we've done a couple beers that kind of tied to the birds of paradise, so the Paradisia family of birds. And each of them has kind of featured a man in a bird costume at the theater. What that really means on a deep spiritual level is up to the interpreter to dig into. But So yeah, we've had that was Paradisornis. We've also had Paradisia Day, and then Paradisia. We're all in this kind of family of like a light saison with citrus and other fruits, and also dry hops. So all those beers are kind of tied together in their recipe, and then also like this kind of this label.
So you want us to interpret this? This is like literature here.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, you have to keep buying the bottles to get like the next chapter of the story. But it's one of those things where I think we always relate to we relate a lot of things to music here, where it's like we sort of know what we're doing with the labels and the story that we're telling, but we also sort of don't. There's and I think a lot of that's sort of Forest and Maine in a nutshell to me. Like we're just doing what comes naturally to us across the board. Like making British beers and Belgian beers, because that's just what we do, really. And same with the labels. There's a cohesive story to them, but we're also kind of figuring it out as we go. And I think we're very lucky that I do the labels, because it's just another part of that genuineness to us.
Yeah, there's no way we could send that idea or concept, I think,
Right.
to a graphic designer or somebody.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
farm that out.
Yeah.
I think it's very tied to Daniel and this place.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so I guess I want to talk a little bit about the beer itself, right? So it's and I'll read it straight from the label, but it's a dry hopped, barrel aged saison brewed with kiwi and clementine, and so we were talking about it a little bit beforehand, but it's primarily primary fermentation is done with a forage yeast strain, local forage yeast strain, and then I guess is it then kind of secondary to, I guess, on the kiwi and clementine after?
So it'll do about a week of a primary fermentation with the forage yeast, and then it'll rest in barrels for about 6 months or so, I believe. And then after the barrel aging, then we'll pull it into a blending tank and add the fruit and dry hops.
Okay.
And then it goes through, another re-fermentation in the bottle, and kind of becomes a new thing at that point too. I almost feel like that ties in with what Dan was just saying about having this idea that we're doing what comes naturally and know what we're doing, but also at a certain point you also throw the beer up, to whatever, to the yeast, to the microbes, to do their thing. And you can have intentions and you can have a direction that the beer is going to take, but oftentimes, you might be surprised, or it just becomes something new. And I feel like we often feel that once a beer reaches a certain point in the bottle conditioning process, there's just this magic element that you can never fake with forced carbonating. You can't really fake by engineering the beer in a certain way. It just it's this magical moment in the beer.
I'm happy you used the word magic, because as I was reading up on you, it's funny because a lot of brewers will call brewing an art, and I guess people have asked you about that. And you said, well, it's not really art. There's a very kind of methodical approach to what we're doing. It's not necessarily so artistic. It's more, we have this approach, and then there's some sort of magic that happens, and it creates this product that we have in the bottle. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, seeing what Dan does with his paintings and things and art in that way, and then we also play in a band together, and just thinking about music and a creative process on that kind of level. The brewing process feels a little bit different. There's just more procedure and routine to it. But then there is definitely a creative element, but the art part of it just feels like a different kind of creativity in a way. And yeah, I think that at a certain point, you're giving it up to other living organisms to do their thing with it, and you try to create the conditions where they're going to do what you want it to. But it's often unpredictable, and it's often not going to work on the time frame you might have in mind. And then, yeah, that lovely surprise in like a bottle conditioned beer, you know, after like 6 to 8 weeks or something, where it just like, it might be carbonated that whole time, but then like it just all of a sudden has this effervescence that just like these aromas out of the glass, and you can smell it on the bar in front of you. And
yeah, this, I'm telling you, I had the glass like 8 inches away from my face, and I'm smelling that like beautiful kind of funky clementine. I'll show the beer, I guess, for the people who are watching, but man, I think the words I used before we started was, you know, it's incredibly soft and beautiful beer, but it's got so much aroma and flavor to it. You're right. I mean, it's like 8 inches away from my face, and I'm smelling this like beautiful. I don't even want to finish it because I love the aroma coming out of the glass.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we've recently been like playing with dry hopping some of the beers coming out of barrels with like fruitier hops, you know, like Citra and Mosaic, and some of the flavor combinations of like the Brett funk that you're getting with some of these fruity hops. It's really bizarre stuff, like really, really cool flavors we haven't really, you know, experienced in a lot of beers, I think. Like the Brett tastes different than the Brett that might be in a barrel or a bottle on its own, and the hops taste different than if you just like dry hopped a pale ale with that same hopping regimen.
Sure.
Like it's something about the combination, and I feel like that's where that kind of like that idea of like a magic or like throwing things up to, you know, to other organisms to take over comes in, because I don't know, it certainly feels like unpredictable combination of elements there.
Sure. I can see that with a brewery that's producing 100% clean beers, you know, a little bit more mechanical, right? You want to create, when people come in, they want to have that same pale ale. They want to know that that's the beer I'm getting. Dan, do you feel the same way coming from art school, that this is not necessarily an art, it's more of a thing of magic that kind of happens, or is it?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, the debate's like art versus craft, and I feel like you could say beer is like a craft. It's much more process oriented, but I agree with Jared. Like there's a certain element of magic to it, you know, at least for these beers, because you only do so much, and then the rest of it's out of your hands. And
so you view it as you guys are creating the environment for the microflora to do it.
Right.
Right. I mean, you guys are just creating the environment. You're creating the grain bill that you think it needs to potentially, hopefully, come out with what you were thinking in the beginning.
Right. And like, you know, weird things happen sometimes, and then, you know, sometimes the beer can taste horrible, and then it turns into the most beautiful thing ever.
Sure.
And that, to me, that's just total magic. You know, there's science behind it, but you know, it's beyond our control at that point.
Sure. This seems like the perfect combo for you guys, right? You both said you're really into like jumping head first and everything, and wanting to know everything. It feels like it's the perfect combo for you guys to have this like real intense focus on an English style and a Belgian style, where one is, hey, these microbes, go do your thing, we'll see you in 7 months, versus the British ales, where it's like, I really need to mold these guys to create this ESB every single time, right? Did that play into it at all when you guys were thinking about how you guys were going to approach the brewery? Because I know you guys, at least you can correct me if I'm wrong again, but I know you guys have been friends for a long time, so I'd imagine you guys had a lot of conversations about this idea. Is that a little bit that went into the process behind Forest in Maine as an idea?
Sort of, but that seems to put more thought into than there was. I mean, it was like that natural thing. It's like, you know, these are the beers I like to drink and make, and these are the beers you like to drink and make, and they go really well together. And so yeah, it was you know, definitely just an easier decision, you know.
Cool. So we recently put an article up on Craft Commander about you know, for home brewers to forage and culture their own yeast. Gus Adkison, the Farmhouse Obsession, put me in contact with you guys, but he helped us with that article. He's a huge fan of you guys. And he says he learned a lot about the process from you guys. And so I guess I want to know, you know, what kinds of things did you forage yeast off of to create this flavor profile? I mean, it's really nice. I mean, I'm doing some of it in my own house. And some of the aromas are like incredibly strong and kind of a little off-putting sometimes. I mean, a while for you guys to get to the house culture? Is there a house culture? And then did it take a while for you guys to get to this point where this is the forage yeast culture that we want to use in our beer?
I think we feel like really fortunate just how it was able to play out here. Like we kind of had this idea and kind of ran with this like little experiment, and it actually rather quickly produced some like really good results. And we just kind of ran with it. And like once we were brewing some saisons that were kind of like matching the flavor profile that we were into and looking for, we just kind of decided, okay, from here on out, we're just going to do this forage yeast. This is going to be our saison yeast. So for all the saisons we brew in-house and the stuff that goes into bottles, like that's the yeast we use. And another thing about it, like each spring we culture up a new batch of it. So in a way, it's like for a year we have this like vintage yeast culture. Sure. So all the saisons that we brew this year are made with the yeast we started culturing in the spring. And then next spring we'll go out and do that again. So for the past 3 years, you know, we've had 3 different cultures and they all have been like fairly similar, but, you know, have these like subtle differences. And we think that that's like a really cool way to just kind of like reflect just like the changing conditions and like the sense of like time and place we have here. But we really just like, we'll do the culturing from the brewery property. You know, there's some like mulberry tree in the backyard. There's a honeysuckle around the corner. There's a cherry blossom in the front yard, and you know, whatever is kind of in season at a certain time in the spring, we'll go and, you know, culture off the flowers or fruits.
That's awesome.
And then kind of grow it up to a scale that we can work with our brewery. That's
really cool. I mean, for whatever reason, I think I know the reason is because people got used to drinking like this real fizzy yellow water for a long time in America, but people never saw beer as an agricultural product. I mean, you talk to people and you say beer is an agricultural product, and people look at me like I'm a unicorn, you know? And it's like, well, it's just as agricultural as wine. I mean, the ingredients are growing in different conditions that influences, you know, for hops, the alpha acids in the crop, or you know, everything is influenced by the environment. And so you guys are taking it one step further. I think it's really cool that you're creating a vintage in this types of yeast, or the, you know, maybe the types of yeast and bacteria that you're finding in the area on a certain year.
It was kind of interesting in a way. We had like a really warm late winter here. So like we have this cherry tree in the front yard, and it typically goes into full bloom right around mid-April. But this year it was in full bloom in early March. And so like that was kind of like telling us like, okay, it's time to go culture yeast off of it. But, you know, I would suspect that you would get a much different microbial population, you know, just coming out of winter versus, you know, an extra month or so of kind of like letting things, you know, grow and fly around out there. So it's kind of interesting to see what like this year's culture is going to do compared to last year's in that regard.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that to me is incredibly interesting too. And it's again, it's, you know, everyone has this perception that wine is like this greater, I think it's changing, but there's always been this kind of like inherent thing in people's brains that wine is this greater product, right? It's you know, they care for the grapes, they care for the whole process, and it's this beautiful oak fermentation. Well, you guys are doing the same thing, right? And so it's beautiful to see that you guys are really even embracing that further, not just saying, well, we've got this yeast culture, this mixed house culture, and that's what we're relying on. No, we want to see what the year has to give us, and it's along the same lines. I mean, it's a really cool concept. Have you found from year to year, you know, major differences that you've been like, wow, maybe, for example, 2015 was just so much better than 2016, or 2014 was our best year?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I feel like the first year was, I think, just came off fairly clean, but like kind of in that classic saison profile. Then I feel like the second year, for whatever reason, that strain was able to put out a lot more acid. So any beers that we kind of backed off the hops a little bit more, or maybe even had like a little like darker malts in, it would produce this like really cool, like clean lactic acidity. But it was also able to like ferment a beer, you know, completely dry with, you know, no acid. So far this year, we're getting like this really cool, like kind of botanical kind of spicy note going on, but all like very subtle, you know, subtle variations. Like, and it's hard, you know, because you can't like, you know, freeze, you know, a sample and compare like batch to batch, like next to each other. You're kind of going off your memory, but again, you know, I think that really ties into the romance for us.
And I'm drinking a bottle that was bottled on February 17th of this year. So that's going to have the 2015 culture.
Right. That would be brewed with last year's culture. Sure. Yeah.
It's really fantastic. It's got a really nice acidity to it. It's beautiful. So I guess, was that just something that felt natural to you guys? It seems like a lot of the decisions made at the brewery aren't like, let's sit in some conference room and do this with our fingers and figure out, you know, 5 months from now, I need to have this done. 10 months from now, it's kind of like, you know, we've got this really great, you know, I don't know, batch of clementines, and let's make a beer with it. Is there, it seems like you guys are very kind of, you know, go with what nature gives us, and I love that. It's, again, romantic. It's kind of the theme of the conversation. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. It's probably not the best way to run a business. But
yeah, well, if you were doing the best way to run a business, you'd be trying to like take over America. Like I said, I mean, there is pros and cons to everything, right? And so, you know, on one hand, you don't have to deal with the distributor so much, but on the other hand, you know, you get to do a little bit more about what you want, right? Or what you get to do a little bit more of what you want and how you want, right? Is that?
I think we're fortunate to like live in this time right now where you can do that, and you know, assuming like the quality's there and the word gets out, like you can find a customer base that's going to respond to that. You know, I think that it feels really special that like not only are we like able to do these things that like we really like, but to be able to put that out and have it resonate with other people, it's really reassuring. You know, I mean, it's odd in a lot of ways. Like you very, you know, proud of what you're doing, but at the same time very like insecure and like worrying that, am I the only person that kind of likes things, or am I the only person that's gonna like think that this label is cool or funny or whatever it is, you know?
Well, I'm assuming, based on the fact that you've bought the building next door and you're expanding to the building next door, the neighborhood has responded in a positive way. Not only the neighborhood, but the world, now based on kind of the internet, the way things have gone with social media, has been able to really embrace what you guys are doing as well. It's a weird thing, right? Where you're a community brewery, but people around the world are kind of wanting your beer. And so you're kind of servicing the community, but at the same time, do you see it as you're servicing the world? Is there any of that goes into your thought process when you're coming up with a beer on either side of the house, the Belgian or the English style side of the house?
I mean, I definitely feel like we're aware of that. I don't know if it like really influences like our decision making or, you know, what we're trying to brew or anything, but it definitely is interesting, you know, like the regular crowd we have, you know, that comes in on a Tuesday or Wednesday versus the crowd that might come out for a bottle release. They're both like passionately like responding to the beers we're making, but like kind of different beers, and they're coming from different places. And I think they're, you know, a nice balance in that way.
Sure.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that some guys come in and, you know, they come here for the hand pump beers, and they probably have no idea that we bottle these crazy saisons that spent 6 months in oak barrels. You know, they just know that we're a place to get like fish and chips and a pint of bitter.
There you go. That's awesome, though.
Yeah.
Have you found that you guys have started to like really fall in love with one side of the house versus the other, or has it remained like, I'm the big Belgian guy, I'm the big, you know, traditional English style beer guy?
I think
or have you kind of blended into this, like, we really love working with wild yeast and bacteria? Or
yeah, I mean, we love all the beers we make, and yeah, it's funny because from the outside people see us as this, you know, this brewery with like a wall in the middle, and you know, I brew the English beers and Jared brews the Belgian beers, but yeah, that was never true, and we both equally love all the beers and brew them interchangeably. So
yeah, you guys are both brewing. You know, you guys are both taking over either side now at this point, right? I mean, it's not really
right.
I had another question for you on something we had just spoke about. Oh, it was you know, so we were just talking about vintages, right? And another big thing about that people have always said with wine is, well, you know, if you're eating a nice meal, you drink a nice bottle of wine. And again, I still think that you know, that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, a beer like this is going to pair so beautifully with the most elegant of meals, right? And I know that you guys have food on site and you pay attention to what food you're serving. It's not just like, oh, well, you're in a brewery, so you're gonna have a hamburger and chicken wings. It's like, let's you know, you're doing a small amount of food from what I read, and you mentioned Gerard Oliver's The Brewmaster's Table, which is a book that everybody should read if they haven't. But you know, how much does food play into your mind? And then, you know, kind of along the lines of what I was saying before, is does it annoy you as much as it annoys me when people say, oh, I'm having a nice meal, don't bring that bottle of beer, only wine?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of wines, there's like a perception that of like a delicacy, or a delicateness, I guess, to a wine that might seem to lend itself to working with food a little bit more. But I find that like a lot of the beers that you know, really resonate with me tend to be like the ones that just kind of have this beautiful delicateness to them. Beers that are really dry, that might have oak and acidity. They'll be like plenty complex to work with food. And then, yeah, oftentimes like they're going in like a more elegant bottle as well. But yeah, I definitely think that there is and probably always will be like a stigma if like you show up to a nice restaurant with a crowler, you know.
Yeah, but again, this is not a crowler, right? I mean,
right.
This is not a crowler, and this is not, you know. Okay, so, you know, you guys play it off as like, you know, this is just natural to us. This is just what we feel, and this is how we do it. But there's an elegance to this too. I mean, there's an elegance, there's a purposefulness, there's an artistic value to this. It's just like any wine. I mean, it's more colorful than a wine label maybe, but it's just as elegant as a wine label, right? So it's not a crowler. But if I show up with a bottle of beer like this to a $400 dinner, I shouldn't be kicked out of the building. It's just as, you know.
And plus with that, you know, maybe you could have a couple of them, whereas a couple bottles of wine, you're gonna be a little tipsy at the end, you know.
They're gonna wheel you out of there. Yeah. So, how important do you guys think about food as you're designing a recipe, or do you guys, you know, is it strictly the beer, and then I guess the question I'm trying to get to is, does beer pairing with food ever come into play in the original concept of the beer?
I wouldn't say so in the original concept. It is something like we think about after the fact, especially after like tasting the beer. And there are certain pairings that just seem to like jump out. Certain foods that just kind of like scream for like a nice beer. Like every time we're in the restaurant and, you know, I see like a server walking by with like mussels, you know, cooked in one of the saisons, like walking by, and there's like steam in the air, and there's like that seafood aroma and like beer and butter. Like, I don't know, it just makes my mouth water for like a nice saison to like go with it. Yeah. I don't know if like we actively like plan it from the get-go so much.
Well, was there a beer that put you guys on the map locally first? And I guess if there was, what was that beer?
Marius.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, Marius was like a saison that we do each year that's aged in wine barrels, and then has fruit added to the wine barrels. So the first year we added some cherries from like a neighbor's sour cherry tree.
Mm.
And
a neighbor's sour cherry tree?
Yeah.
Oh, see, that's awesome.
Yeah, just up the block. And actually, we just found out that she's selling the house, so we have to like work that into the deed. Has to let us come and pick cherries.
You gotta tell the owner, I own the rights to this tree. I'll pay you like, you know, whatever it costs a year. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's been a beer that we've done each year with different fruits. But that, I think it was either like the first or second beer in bottles that we put out. And we thought it was a fabulous beer, and I think it was received really well. And I think, yeah, when you put like barrel aged and fruit and beer in the same sentence, people tend to get excited. So
you get the beer nerd line on bottle day, right? It's like that's what I guess what you know. We're kind of leaning towards the conversation of, you know, where are we going with Forest and Main? I mean, what do you guys foresee it being an equal split along the way, or is it something that you guys think, you know, one of the two sides of the house is going to take precedent? Is it maybe one takes precedent in-house and the other one takes precedent on to-go sales? Or is there like is there any, I guess what I'm trying to get is there any focus that you guys think will be your focus going forward?
I think it'll always be, you know, a nice balance of things. I love, you know, as a consumer going to a place with, you know, kind of a handful of options. Granted, we're not like trying to brew one of everything, you know, as much as we love Pilsners, we're not really trying to put 3 Pilsners on tap too. But I think, you know, with some additional space next door, that'll allow us to do more barrel aging, more bottling. So we definitely want to up that production. But the plan is also to be like a little more busy, to have like a little more off-site sales in the greater Philadelphia area. And that'll primarily probably come from, you know, pale ales and bitters and more clean saisons.
Sure.
I think the bottle will always be like the leader for our sales and our notoriety, and that, you know, the bottles can get traded across the country, across the world.
Sure.
We don't have
interesting, right? That idea is an interesting idea, right? I mean, again, here you are, a community brewery, and yet what really just driving some breweries today is the ability that people say, well, man, I really love that Forest and Main beer. I'm in Oregon. I got to get that beer. And so your beer is traveling. I mean, it's like, it's easy to get your beer around the country. I'm in Miami and I have your beer, right? And so,
yeah, it's like this weird gray distribution network in a way. It's like, you know, breweries can like sell their beer to consumers, and that beer can be consumed in places where that brewery is not selling beer. I don't know, it's a very interesting time to be doing that.
Is it a good or a bad thing, you think? That's one of these kind of broad questions I like to ask a lot of brewers. Everybody seems to have a different perspective on.
I think it's great. I mean, it allows like small breweries like us to still engage with like the customer on an individual level. You know, it allows like, I don't know, it's happening because people are excited about the beer. You know, like they're so excited about it that, you know, they're actively trading it and trying to get new beers, and, you know, yeah, it's all over the internet, and sometimes people feel weird about, you know, that whole world or whatever. But, you know, these people, it's like you're friends in a way, and, you know, you get to share beers and try things that you're excited to try that you couldn't get otherwise. And a brewery, you know, probably could never afford to, you know, take on another market like that, you know.
Right.
I think it's all fueled by people's passion, like the consumers and then the brewers are able to make the beers that they're passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about these kinds of beers with these yeast profiles is that they're a little easier to transport, right? I mean, it's not like you better drink them in a week or two. Yeah. So it's a little safer for you guys, I'm sure, to bottle this and then not necessarily worry so much that somebody's going to be trading this 3 weeks from now.
Definitely.
Right,
across the country. So it's nice to have that also, but. So for a brewery that's producing that kind of beer, it's great. For a brewery like The Alchemist that's producing a bunch of IPAs, it's kind of like worrisome, I'd imagine. But so we were going into the second space a little bit. You know, so you've got this beautiful Victorian house. You guys did it to your standards or how you wanted to see it. You guys worked on it for a long time. And the community really took to you guys. And so now you're moving into a second space next door, which is going to allow you to produce more, sell more. you're gonna have from what I see, a stage for music. I guess what's the idea behind the second space? Is it going to be just an extension of the first space, or is there going to be something different that people are going to be able to experience there?
I think it'll be, allow us to do just kind of more of what we're doing here. This place, the house has a ton of charm, but it's also not the easiest place to make a beer or to have a full kitchen in. So having that space can kind of take some of the pressure off of the house itself. Also let us fit a whole lot more barrels and bottles and stuff there. And also have like a bigger bar space, hopefully with like more beer on tap.
Okay.
You can't really see behind us, but like we're in the bar room and it's cozy. If you have, a dozen people in here, it's like a full bar room. and while that's great, it also kind of like limits, people's enjoyment sometimes.
Yeah, but I love that. I mean, I think it plays into the product. I think beer's it should be a like community. You shouldn't have a problem being so close to somebody when you're drinking a glass of beer, right? It's like something that brings people together.
Yeah, and it kind of like forces conversation, which is sometimes good, maybe sometimes not. But like we don't have TVs in here either, so it just kind of, it lends itself to conversation and people, hanging out together.
Now both of you guys seem like you've really kind of completely embraced this whole idea: the brewery, the art, the community, the food, everything. Is there anything each one of you? I guess it's a question for each one of you. Is there anything that you've learned since you've opened Forest in Maine? Maybe the reason I'm asking this question is because I think this brewery represents more than just a place where you can go get a beer. And to me, I love that about you guys. From everything I've read, everything I've heard today, everything I've drank, it seems to be representative of a little bit more, whether that's purposeful or not. Is there anything you guys have learned since you started that you said, wow, we really caught on to something. I really love this about our brewery. I always ask one of those.
I think, for me anyway, I think it's been just that fact that being able to do something that, to make beers that like I feel really passionate about and really care a lot about, and to have that resonate and people be into it has just been so rewarding in a lot of ways. I guess I wasn't really expecting that. You're always, if you're trying to open a brewery, you're expecting that people are going to like your beer. Otherwise, why would you do it? But I guess just the way that, people can resonate with the beer in the same way, that we do, has just been, I guess I wasn't expecting how rewarding that would be in a lot of ways, to see people as passionate about it as we are.
Before Dan answers, do you see the beers as your baby? A lot of guys have said that to me. It's like, this is my baby. I mean, this is like, I put so much time into this thing, so much effort into thinking up the idea behind it. Does it become like a little bit of you? And so it's like, do you take offense to people go, oh, I don't like that?
I definitely feel that way about like certain beers. Like we have this one beer, Solaire and Solaire Reserve. I definitely feel that way about. Yeah, if somebody doesn't like that, I'm like, you just don't get it, man. But then there's other beers, it's almost like you have this weird respect for them in like their own way. Like they're this weird shaman in the barrel that's, he's not your baby at all. He's doing his own thing and he's going to get there, and you just listen to him when he says it's time to bottle or something.
Sure. Very Cantillon of you.
I totally agree with Jared. I'm just like continually blown away by how accepted we are, not just across just in Amber itself, but across the country, across the world. And it's like, because I think Jared and I know we've gotten better at this, but from the get-go, we kind of made it hard for people to like this place. It's like it's an old house, very tiny. We serve beers at room temperature from the hand pumps.
Yeah, sure.
And we put like sour beer on draft and like hoppy beer, and which a lot of people like, but like, you know, our friends who bring their parents in, they might not like sour beer or hoppy beers. You know, we never had like a light beer on. We never, you know, we intentionally kind of like didn't please people for.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we pleased a lot of people, and I'm just constantly amazed by, you know, sometimes I see stuff online where I'm just like, wow, I think this person likes Forest and Maine more than I do, you know. It's like it's crazy. It's very humbling, and it's amazing. So
that's got to be mind blowing, right? It's like I create this product that people just attach to so much.
right.
It is kind of like art. Again, we're going back to it. You know, you may create this thing and say, I think it's beautiful, and then somebody goes out and goes, my God, I'm going to pay $1 million for that painting. I'm sure there's people, whatever price tag you put on one of these beers, are going to pay it, and that's got to be humbling to the 10th degree, right? I think it's really great, and I think it's really great that you guys have catered to yourselves first, because it's allowed people to come in and go, well, this is different, this is unique, I like this because it's unique, instead of saying, I guess what's happening, I think, in some communities is people go, oh, I think that, you know, this is representative of the community because there's a large Hispanic culture there, and so I'm going to brew beer with a Hispanic, you know, fruits that, you know, these Hispanic guys like, you know, and so they're going to brew for that. Instead of saying, like, this is what I love, and come in and enjoy what I love in the environment that I love. And I think I think you're able to build a much stronger base of fans around your product that way. Have you felt that? Have you seen that? Is there any?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's, you know, I think it really, like I think I said earlier, it just shows from like the outside of the building, the inside of the building, the beer, you know, it's, people can just, I'm very attuned to like when someone or something is genuine, and I feel like I can see right through it when it's like, all right, you know, that this is the label, or this is the beer that like their sales guys said would sell well in the summer, you know, this is the label they thought, you know, with the silly punny name would like appeal to certain people.
Sure.
And I think people just really respect that about us, where, you know, they just know that this is coming from us, and there's no like pretense or sales bullshit or anything. It's just like,
right. It's unapologetic. It's who we are.
Sometimes to a fault, but I think, you know, people really
sure. But that's what's that to me is what's great about a brewery like yours. And then so I guess going forward, what can we expect from Forest and Maine? I mean, we've got some really beautiful stuff to look forward to. We've got different vintages of yeast cultures to look forward to, a new location to look forward to, maybe some more widespread distribution. Is there anything I'm missing? That's pretty awesome. That's pretty lofty as it is.
I think we're just trying to, you know, find like a comfortable level for us, and then just kind of like work backwards and dial everything in and make things, you know, improve quality across the board, and just make our lives a little more, you know, less stress, and, you know, kind of smooth things out, you know, fix that leak over there, and, you know, improve that pump over there, and give so-and-so a raise, you know.
Sure. Yeah, take care of the people who are helping you out every day, right? That's
yeah. No, that's been like another big piece for us, is like, you know, this started like the two of us, and, you know, we're definitely like the ones, you know, guiding this place, but it really only works with, you know, the people we have.
Sure.
Running the place. I'm
gonna cut that part out and make sure everyone sees that, because we gotta make sure that people understand that going forward. I mean, that's important.
Yeah. No, on like a, you know, in the big picture, but just like that day-to-day level, you know, this place, you know, doesn't get clean, doesn't, you know, cook food, doesn't get the kegs clean without, you know, everybody that's in here doing it. And as much as, you know, we talk about like the customers like responding to what we're doing, I think we've been like really fortunate with the staff we have. You know, somehow they, you know, see these like two quirky, weird bosses, you know, as endearing, like, you know, want to continue working here.
That's awesome.
That's probably the biggest surprise, actually.
They actually like us. Holy shit. Is there anywhere people can get your beer coming up that maybe don't get the opportunity to try it? Like maybe like I'm talking about like a place like GABF. Is there gonna be any festivals you guys gonna be at soon that people that maybe?
Captain Lawrence is having a sour festival in September. I think September 10th we'll be there. Festival of Dankness out at Modern Times. We're actually sending some kegs out there. That's August 18th, I believe. Thereabouts. Those are two things on the immediate horizon.
Okay. Cool. I'm missing that Modern Times thing by a week.
Oh,
nah. Anyways, hey guys, this has been awesome. I love having breweries like you guys on because it's what I think it was so fantastic about the industry is that you've got I'm going to call it art. You may not call it art, but there's these really beautiful artistic interpretations of what beer can be, should be. It's kind of like what Radiohead does. I don't know if you guys like Radiohead, but it's kind of like to me what Radiohead does every few years. They remind people of what music can be if you really strive to be original and good and innovative. We've got a bunch of really great breweries kind of pushing the boundaries like yourselves and saying, this is us, this is what we do. We're going to push the boundaries. We're going to do as much local as possible. We're going to show you what's around. And I really love featuring stories like this, two guys that come together, different kind of, focus, interest, but in the end of the day, it's still towards that goal of innovation of, creating something new from a traditional style, and really pushing the craft forward. It's not like, well, we're just going to brew a bunch of pale ales. And nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But we're going to put our spin on the pale ale. We're going to put our spin on this style. So it's awesome to talk to guys like you, and I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us tonight and kind of telling everybody that is a fan of my site a little bit about what makes you guys you. And so I just thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been an honor.
Yeah, it was our pleasure. So thank you.
So guys, if you haven't had Forest and Main yet, I really recommend you go out and find it. I know that I say that to people, but this is really phenomenal stuff. Again, here's one of the bottles. It's just such a beautiful beer. It's complex. It's different. There's so much going on in the glass, but then at the same time, you can sit down and drink it really probably too quickly. And at the same time, you could probably sit down and enjoy this over an hour and a half with friends with some really great food, tons of food. I kept thinking this would be really beautiful seafood. And so if you haven't had it, we've talked about it a little bit. Go out and try and find a way to trade for it, buy it, go over to Philadelphia and get it yourself. I'm looking forward to getting up there and going to see you guys. That location seems just so too awesome to not go to. So if you're in the area, go stop by and see them. And guys, thanks so much.
Thanks again, Marco.
All right, take it easy.
Yeah.